Hello everybody, it is Saturday the 14th of February and I want to talk about this, the Kybalion. This is such an eye-opener if you understand what it is they're doing, because this tells you what they're doing. It calls itself the Master Key, the key that will open the doors into all the other spiritual teachings, because this is the source. The Hermetic knowledge was the first knowledge from which all the other teachings are derived, or they're using that knowledge. They're creating pathways into states of consciousness, because that is what every spiritual teaching does. It takes you to a certain state of consciousness. Yeah, and then once you are in that state of consciousness, you first of all see the world according to that state, and you act according to that state. So, but the Kybalion shows you how to do it. It doesn't actually tell you what to do with it. It only gives you the building blocks with which to build. Now, I want to go back to my last video, where I was talking about a pathway from fear into love, which is a spiritual pathway that will take you into a state which is called Stockholm Syndrome. That is the spirit, from fear to love is a spiritual pathway into Stockholm Syndrome. And I'm making this because there's a shift before you go up. I want to show you this here. So it is the understanding of polarities, yeah? In which case you have to be totally dual in order to understand this. And that is to say that in the created, everything has its poles. Everything has two sides to it. That is a universal truth in the created. The difference between the poles is a difference in vibration, from the lowest to the highest. But there are many, many different polarities. Yeah, not just one. So you have the polarity from fear, which actually the higher vibration is courage. If you were to straight up raise your vibration, it would take you to courage. Love, the lowest vibration, is hate. So if you raise your vibration from hate, it will take you to love. And there was something in this book that I couldn't find in my last video. I found it now. I want to show you this here. And this is the student who is familiar with the process by which the various schools of mental sciences, etc., produce changes in the mental state of those following their teachings may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the latter is readily understood. The change is not in the nature of a transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but is merely a change of degree in the same thing. A vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc. But heat may readily be transmuted into cold, simply by lowering the vibration. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable. So are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transmuted into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles along which transmutation is possible. So again, this spiritual pathway that you're being taught from fear into love, at some point you have to change polarities. And I was thinking about that, and I think the change of polarity is happening on the level that you're on. So you're in fear, which means you're on the lowest vibration of the fear, courage, polarity. The shift actually occurs on that level. So again, you're in fear, there is danger. And that danger is real. Something is actually happening to you that produces that fear. You're being oppressed, you're being hurt, you're experiencing a reality that produces the feeling of fear. Now, in order to get into Stockholm Syndrome, you need to make a shift from that polarity. And you change on that level that you're on from fear, and the shift must occur, a change into hate. You shift into hate. And then you go up the ladder to love. And that is the spiritual pathway into Stockholm Syndrome. To create the shift from fear into hate, and then up the polarity. Now, I was in a spiritual teaching, or at least at the beginning of it. I got out of it not because I understood completely what was wrong, but I knew something was wrong. Especially when they started telling me, oh, you must only talk to us. This is the only way. Again, this is the only way. This is the way, the truth, and the light. And you must only talk to us and be with us. And I thought, you know what? No. Forget it. They kept saying that more and more and more. And I was, no. I didn't understand at the time why. I now understand why. That was an intuitive reaction. Well, I'm now in awareness why it was wrong to follow them. Now, it was a Kabbalah institute. The founder of which was Yehuda Ashlam, who lived 1885 to 1954. And they call him the Baal Salam, which translated means the master of the ladder. Now, Baal Ha-Sulam, that is the ladder, one specific ladder. Not a ladder amongst many, but one specific one. And they kept saying, let's create together. What are you creating? I actually asked them that question, what are you creating? I emailed them that question, what are you creating? And I never got an answer. Which was one of the reasons I definitely got out. Although they have been telling us all along. But what they wanted to achieve was a state of equivalence with the Creator. And they were defining the Creator as the giver. Again, that cannot be speaking about the all, because you cannot define the all as one thing. The all is all things. But, yeah, it is the giver. It is pure, pure giving. And you should be like that. Now, if your man, Ashlan, was the master of that ladder, of that polarity, then that again is one specific polarity, and that is the polarity of giving and receiving. Yeah? So they would take their students up the ladder, up the polarity into the higher vibration, which is purely giving. Yeah? Without any selfish desire. I know that ladder. I've been up that one. Where I was in a state, not that, and I'm waking up from that. I was trapped on the top of that ladder, or very close to the top. Well, I'm waking up now to the knowledge of self. But really the state where when people came wanting something, I would say yes before they opened their mouth. I really was at that state. And yes, of course, right, yeah, you can have it, I will do it, and really the absolute feeling of guilt if I said no, if I dared to say no, yeah, that's actually not a good state to be in. Especially not if you are trapped in that vibration. That is a vibration, that's a state of consciousness. When you're trapped there, that is not a good state to be. And really, you should not indiscriminately say yes. You should not indiscriminately do everything that is asked of you without discernment, which would come out of the knowledge of self, which you have lost at that point. And what you would actually create is a perfect slave. I was pretty much there. I'm snapping out of it. Awareness of self, yeah, and the right of self to exist. The fact that I have needs, that I have desires, and I have a right to be. I'm not somebody else's servant. Purely, I can serve others, but that is not all I should be. But this is where they're taking their students into that state of consciousness. And again saying, you are on the highest vibration, therefore you are in enlightenment, or you have reached the height of pure altruism, equivalence with the Creator, and you're there, you're fantastic. And you're not, you're a slave. Your state of consciousness, that is a slave. Now, Baal HaSulam, the master of the ladder. And what is mastery of the ladder? What is the mastery of a polarity? We are being told to go to the highest point, always. The highest point of vibration, and then you have the mastery. And I don't think that that is truly what the master, this is where we're being driven. I don't think that's what the mastery is. If you were the master of that ladder, that means you're master of every point on that ladder, on every point. And you can shift. You can shift from one point to another, whereas they're trapping their students in just one point. That's a trap. And of course, if you are in that, if you were totally becoming that point, which thankfully I did not, but you were to be that state of consciousness where you really have no choice anymore but to give, because that is what you have become. I would say, first of all, by reaching that point, and then by repetition until it becomes you. And then if you are at that point, you would say, this is the only truth and there is no other choice. That is not because other choice does not exist. It does. You had the choice. You had the fullness of the polarity in which to move and in which they do move. You had that choice, but by the time you become that one point, then the choice is gone. But you trapped yourself. In fact, you were driven into that trap, and you were a willing participant in your own change. You worked on it yourself to trap yourself in one point. So I say, what is mastery? Is it to get to the highest vibration, but to have knowledge of all the vibrations in that polarity and what they work? And here comes to be able to shift. out of your own free will. And here is the principle of correspondence, which is as above, so below. And that means as in the spirit, so in the material. As above, so below, so above, as within, so without. And there it stops. I've seen nowhere where it says as without, so within. And I think what they're leaving out, what is not there, is extremely important. It is not as without, so within. So that is to say, the master is not influenced by what is outside of him. What is inside of him influences what is outside, as within, so without, but it doesn't go the other way. That is their mastery, which I think is wrong. You should be influenced by, to a certain extent, you should be influenced by that which is around you, because you are part of a web, and whatever happens around you will affect you. So you should care. You should care about what is around you, because it is part of your life. But they are not. So, again, what they're doing, and again, it is not only, well, first of all, it is the mastery of a ladder, of a polarity. And I'm wondering if the degrees, like in the Freemasons and others, if that is how many polarities you are the master of. How many polarities you can understand. And then it is not only being going up and down, but to be able to shift polarities at some point. And then you have a vast spectrum of mental states, or of vibrational states, that you can get into at will. You know what those states will work. And as I said, you have the freedom of the spectrum. You can go up, you can go down, you can go sideways, depending on how many polarities you are the master of. The more polarities you are the master of, the greater your field of movement. So they are free. They are absolutely free to move amongst all the different mental states. Once they're trapping you, any spiritual teaching will trap you in one. It is the pathway, I would say upper polarity, sideways, there are pathways to certain states of consciousness. And they're moving you along those paths to one state, and they trap you there, whilst they move freely through all the states that they have mastery of. Now, there is one more point in the Kybalion, and that will explain the next thing, and this is so important. In addition to the change of the poles of one's own mental state by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence in its manifold phases shows us that the principle may be extended as to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which has been written and taught of late years. When it is understood that mental induction is possible, that is, a mental state may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration or polarization of a certain mental state may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of mental states thus changed. And here's the influence of the stronger consciousness on the weaker, or maybe simply the influence of the one who knows what he's doing on the one that is unconscious. Again, I think we should be influenced by what is around us. And I think when we were a natural man in a natural environment, we were absolutely influenced by what was around us, and that knowledge actually served us. It served us to know what we were in and how we should behave, so to speak, in that environment. We no longer know that. But at the moment, we are not in a natural environment. We are in an artificially created environment, and for most people, they live actually in an environment that is created by media. That is their world. That is what influences their perceptions, and perceptions are vibrations. What they influence first are your vibrations. That creates the perception. And their vibrations are influenced by media. You're being shifted from one state of consciousness into another. And then you have got the influencers. We call them that. The influencers in the media, those that have followers. I was thinking about TikTok and the idiotic things that they're doing. What they are doing doesn't actually matter. You know what form it takes. That is what it is. It is what form it takes. Does not matter. That form is, whatever they're doing is driven by certain state of vibration. And it is a vibration that they are giving to others. What is it called here? Induction, mental induction. That a vibration can be given to another. And I say whatever the algorithms do is to promote those that give out certain vibrations that they give to others. Whatever vibrational state they want you to be in, they have their influencer working for them. Not that the influencer will know what it is they're doing. Most of them are not very intelligent. But they're being used as tools to give out vibrations. And there you have the vibrational field that is artificially created. Whereas in nature you would be, everything gives off vibration. Everything is consciousness. Trees, everything around you gives off vibrations. In nature you would be in the natural field of vibrations. They are creating an artificial field. But it's still working on vibrations. And again, out of the knowledge. They know that state within themselves. They can see that state in others. Out of knowledge of self, you know others. And they're working it. They're working these people as tools. So, that is what is happening and what I can see happening. And it is based on Hermetic knowledge. Every pathway that was created was based on the first knowledge. The knowledge of correspondence as above, so below. They all work together. The principle of mentalism. Everything is consciousness, everything is mental. Principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without. Principle of vibration, the principle of polarities, cause and effect. All of those principles are being worked in the creation of spiritual teachings, which are pathways to a certain state of consciousness that they want you to be in. And those that have a clear understanding of this are free to move amongst the entire spectrum, up and down the ladders and sideways, whatever pathway, follow whatever pathway to a certain state of consciousness that you want to be in. And you're doing that out of your own free will, not being influenced by anything else. Whereas we are being moved, we are being absolutely influenced. We don't know what we're doing. We're being chased up to the top of ladders, saying that is the mastery. Yeah, that is the highest point, that is where you should be. The highest point does not always serve you. Whereas they are on points that absolutely serve them. That's their only consideration. What serves me. You could have the same mastery, yeah, to do good, especially if you can give off your vibration to others. In order to heal, that is what you do. You give off your vibration. Yeah? I mean, they're not using it in that way. It could be, any knowledge can be used for good or for bad. Good and bad is not in the knowledge, it's how you use it. And they're definitely not using it for good, but they have it. And they're working it. So we need to know what it is we're doing. We need to have that knowledge ourselves. Even the understanding of it, yeah, not even if you can't work it yourself, doesn't matter. I can't work it. I understand it, I can't work it. But at least I can see what is being done. You know, to have an understanding what it is they are doing. So you can see them coming. Which right now people can't see them coming. They don't understand. They don't know what it is they themselves are doing by following, as I said, spiritual teachings. What it creates in the end is you. You are the outcome. And then really think about where it is leading you. Where is that path leading you? What is it, what you are becoming? And what will you do in that state? Because you can reason about that before it happens. And you should. Anyway, folks, this is as far as I got with this. I think I want to stay in the Kybalion for a while. I think this is really, I say there's so many teachings out there and you have a choice. And I've heard people say, you know, it doesn't matter, it will all take you to the same point because everything is one. No. No, absolutely not. It does not all take you to the same point. Every teaching takes you to a specific point in the spectrum. It's not all the same. It is not all one great oneness. You need to know what it is they're doing or what it is, where it is they are leading you. Oh, maybe one last thing. That was a thought I had today because David Icke keeps going on about shapeshifters. That is what they are. It's just that their outer shell does not shift, but their energy body is shifting all the time. That is the shape-shifting they're doing, is the shifting of their energy body. And out of that, they will produce different things. Anyway, I leave it at that for today. And I talk to you again soon. Bye.